Good morning. My name is Javier Becerra, Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus. Today our Chairman was unable to be present, and so on behalf of Chairman John Larson of the House Democratic Caucus, I want to thank first all the folks who presented before the caucus this morning. We were fortunate to have the new president of the Federation of Federal, State, and Municipal Employees before us, and we were greatly excited to hear from the team for the president, strategist for the president's campaign, also talking to us. And we obviously were very interested in hearing as much as possible about what Democrats believe are the big issues before this country, starting first of all with jobs and how we are going to move the middle class forward. And so the focus of the conversation we heard, whether it was from leaders for working men and women throughout this country or whether it was from the representatives for the leader of this country, the President Barack Obama, it's all about getting the middle class back to where it needs to be, creating the jobs that will help build this country in a way that will leave our children with far better hopes than our parents ever had. And one of those issues that's come before us is the fact that after more than 550 days under Republican leadership, we still have yet to see a jobs agenda. And yet again, we're seeing a vote to do something that the three branches of our democracy have said should move forward, and that's landmark health care reform, which has put in place the ability for so many families to be able to have quality health care. Whether you're the senior who's watching your out-of-pocket costs for your prescription drugs go down because we are shrinking the donut hole, which has cost so many seniors so much money making decisions between getting prescription drugs that they need or paying for the rent, or whether it's the 5 or 6 million families who today are able to keep their young adult children on their health care policies as a result of the landmark health law, or whether it's all the millions of Americans who are beginning to benefit from the fact that no longer can insurance companies discriminate against an individual when it comes to health care insurance based on a pre-existing condition. We know that there are ways to move forward. One of the ways is not to regurgitate the fights of the past. 2 years ago, we litigated in the floors of Congress the landmark health care law, and it passed in Congress. The executive signed the law, and just recently, the third branch of our government affirmed that the health care law is not just valid, but it is sound. And so it's time to move on to build on what we've been able to accomplish for the American people. And it's time to get focused on the real job for Congress, and that is putting Americans back to work. But here we are, once again, regurgitating the fights of the past, and we find that politically, Republicans are in this state of denial where they're unwilling to move America forward where we must, and that's in creating jobs. Put the President's American Jobs Act on the floor and help us create another 1 million jobs for American workers throughout this country. Help us get the transportation bill that just recently became law at work so we get thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans who are in the construction industry back at work. We have an opportunity to move this country forward, but it's tough if all you're doing is spinning your wheels, relitigating the fights of the past. And now to help us discuss what we have accomplished in this landmark health care law that has moved Americans forward and will continue to do so now that the Supreme Court has said it's a sound law, is a gentleman who worked tirelessly to make sure that Americans can benefit from access to quality health care, and that's Mr. Rob Andrews from New Jersey.
Thank you, Javier. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. There's a reason why none of the House Republicans are in Kansas City this week. Kansas City is the site of the Major League All-Star Baseball game, and when you're 0 for 30, you don't make the All-Star team. The Republicans are about to go 0 for 31 tomorrow. On 30 occasions, the Republicans in the majority have tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Tomorrow is their 31st time pursuing this obsession. And they're going to swing and a miss again tomorrow. Now, it's not so bad that they're whiffing every time they try to do this. It's so bad because of the problem they're ignoring and the rights they are taking away from the American people. They're ignoring the problem that millions of Americans are unemployed and need a job. They're ignoring the problem that hundreds of thousands, really millions of entrepreneurs need access to customers and credit to make their small businesses grow and grow jobs. So we could have on the floor today a bill that would cut taxes for American businesses that create jobs and don't outsource them, but create them here in the United States. But we're not voting on that. We could have on the floor today a bill that would provide money to rehire the teachers and firefighters and police officers, over 500,000 of them, who've lost their jobs in the last couple of years, who aren't buying meals in restaurants, aren't buying cars at the car dealerships, aren't buying houses. We're not doing any of that. Instead, we're going to have the 31st unsuccessful attempt to repeal the health care bill. Now, what they're repealing is not a law. They're repealing the rights of the American people. They're repealing the right of a woman who's had breast cancer to buy health insurance at an affordable price anywhere. They're saying to her, you can't do that anymore. They're repealing the right of a family that's dealing with a malignancy or a terrible health problem like that to no longer be told by their health insurance company, you ran out of money this year, or you ran out of money in your lifetime under this policy. They're repealing the rights of that person. They're repealing the right of the Medicare recipient, the senior citizen who has drug prescription bills of hundreds of dollars a month, who's getting a rebate now between $600 and $800. They're taking that rebate away from her, which is consistent with their antipathy toward Medicare to begin with. They tried to uproot it and repeal it for the last 2 years. This is consistent with that. And what I find most disconcerting about this as they repeal the rights of the American consumer is they're keeping these things for themselves. You understand that if they ever succeed in repealing this bill, their constituents will lose their right to be protected against discrimination because of pre-existing conditions, but they'll keep that right for themselves. Their constituents will have the right to have the insurance company continue to pay their bill without a yearly or annual or lifetime policy limit, but they'll keep that protection for themselves. So at the same time they're ignoring the country's biggest problem, at the same time they're repealing the rights of the American people, they're keeping these benefits for themselves. They're going to go 0 for 31. It's no wonder they're not making the All-Star game.
Rob, thank you. We'll take any questions.
Yeah, yesterday Obama came out and doubled down again on the $250,000 figure for the Bush-era tax cuts, and that kind of broke with some of the things that Schumer and even Nancy Pelosi have been pushing for the $1 million mark in May. Wondering if there's any concern with the $250,000 threshold, just in terms of messaging. Is it tougher to sell that to voters than $1 million?
I think the president has been consistent since he was running for president back in 2008, and that's to say that his focus will be on the middle class, that he will do everything possible to get what was then a crashing economy back up by focusing on the middle class. And he made a commitment to make sure that the middle class would benefit from all the work done in Washington, D.C., working with the private sector to get us back at work. And so you've seen him consistently say that what he's focused on is making sure that the middle class is protected against any tax increases. And he has said that again. He said it just this week again. And I think the president has his eye on the prize, and that is to make sure that if the middle class is back at work, America's back where it should be. And so I think you're going to find that there's a consistent theme running through whatever Democrat is stumping on the in campaign, or any time on the Hill, in floor speeches, or anywhere else is discussing this issue. It's about the middle class. If you get the middle class back at work, strong, getting their kids to college, America will be back as well.
Can I just say something about that, too? Here's one thing there is unanimity on in the room we just came out of. If a married couple is a nurse and a real estate agent, we think they deserve a tax cut. We're ready to vote for it today and put it on the president's desk. Let's see what the Republicans do.
Any other questions?
On that note, did Obama's political advisors at all talk about this? There was some difference of opinion about the $1 million threshold or the $2,000 threshold. Did they discuss at all the importance of sticking together as Democrats?
The president's team focused on moving the country forward, talked about all the things that have been done to take us from this economic abyss that we found ourselves in to the point where now, after 28 consecutive months of job growth, we see over 4.5 million Americans back at work. And they talked about how they're going to continue that, and they're going to battle against the disinformation that may come out from the other side. But the president is focused, moving forward, and that was the focus of their presentation.
You know, the other thing they did they absolutely reminded us of the achievements of this administration, this team. We're very proud of them and proud to have been a part of it. They also educated us about some things about Mitt Romney's record that I frankly didn't know. I didn't remember or know that Massachusetts was first in the country in state debt and 47th in the country in job creation when he was governor of Massachusetts. He almost never talks about his term as governor. I now understand why. This is a guy who's run around the country who's saying, I know how to create jobs and I know how to cut debt. Well, evidently he had a 4-year period of amnesia when he was governor of Massachusetts because they were #1 in debt and almost last in jobs. That's something I frankly didn't know that much about, but don't tell anyone I said it here this morning because I think he wants to keep it a secret.
Excuse me. Again, the president's advisors have said that it's possible that they could be outspent during this campaign. Was there any discussion about how that could affect things down ticket and House races? You have groups like Crossroads, GPS, at all spending millions of dollars in the states. How does that affect you guys?
Well, I think the president has known all along that Republicans were going to use every mechanism they could to raise dollars to try to beat back what has been a president who's worked hard and tirelessly to get the middle class back in shape. And it's very clear that the Republicans, both with money that's contributed the way we've seen it contributed for years up front, along with money that we haven't seen in a long time, and that's all the secret money that we can't account for, are going to do everything they can to try to defeat this president and his efforts to try to help rebuild the middle class. But I think they made it very clear. They're not going to cede any ground. They're not going to cede one vote. And they will get out there and put together the best campaign that has been recorded in this country's history by not just getting out there and asking Americans of every stripe to contribute to their campaign for re-election, but also to put on the ground the largest army of volunteers to go out there and encourage Americans to vote. This president is about getting people to vote, whereas the other side is trying to suppress the vote. We want all Americans to vote. The more they vote, the better off we believe the president is, and he's working very hard to make sure that every American knows that there's a choice to make come November, and he feels very confident if people do vote that we will move forward with this country and with President Barack Obama for another 4 years. Bob, do you have?
No, I just agree with what you said.
Senator Dick Durbin said yesterday that Jesse Jackson Jr. has his constituents to at least let them know what his condition is. Have you spoken to him or anybody in his camp? Do you agree with Senator Durbin on this? Do you know what his status is?
I and Rob can answer this as well. I know far less than Senator Durbin, the home state senator for Congressman Jackson, and I think we're always concerned when any American, especially a national leader, isn't where he should be. And so I think all of us are hoping that everything's going to move forward for Congressman Jackson, and we also respect the privacy of the Jackson family. But I think right now the best thing we could tell you is that we're all hoping that we're going to see Congressman Jackson sooner than later. With that, we'll close. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.